Yo, this is a quick, well, I don't know if it's going to be quick, but it's a beginner MotoGP 25 video with some tips just to sort of get you going. If you just all you want to do is play and win the game, then just select arcade mode, job done. Stop the video now. For everyone else that might want to kind of have a challenge but enjoy the game and gradually keep getting it better at riding, then this video might be for you. There won't be any gameplay on it as such. If you want to see gameplay, there's plenty of videos for that. This is purely just running through a few menus, showing you little things you can select certain ways which are going to help you out, particularly if you're sort of fairly new to the game. Some of these tricks and that or tips, they'll help you in the earlier games if you've not yet bought this one. So here we go. If you if you're not really into your not up to your sort of e-sport playing yet and worried about doing time trials to get into the game, I'm going to say start with a career. Obviously, I've already started a career, and when you start your career, Moto 3. Moto 3 is easily the best class to get the hang of. Um, and also, when you do that, select a KTM. I've done plenty of laps now of a few tracks with all of the bikes, and the KTMs on certain tracks they're massively better than the Hondas, and on all of the tracks they're generally better than the Hondas anyway. I haven't, admittedly, I've only probably done what four of the tracks in depth, but so far the KTM's are definitely superior. Particularly that Green Power one so far is a bit of a standout bike. So that's the first tip, just to give yourself a little bit of an easier life. Next, when it comes to your settings, obviously arcade, you're gonna win it easily. You ain't gonna. That's more for little kids and that at primary school. That ain't for people who want to have like develop some sort of skill. So you're gonna go pro settings, adaptive difficulty. I've had a little play with it. It's not really any better or worse than any of the last game or two. I don't bother with it. My trick has been for quite a long time on a few of the games now. Do your first round on start off in last position, right? Maybe still do the qualifying or whatever, but end up last position on the grid, and whatever difficulty you can just about get in the points on, that's the difficulty you want to play on. So for me, on this game, first race, I got 13th, I think, on 90%. So that's what I've left it on. I think second and third race I come 8th. That was after I'd got an upgrade, because on this game you can choose your upgrades as you go along, whereas on the last two you got some at summer break and you didn't even know what the hell they were, so it was a load of shit. This one you get an upgrade after the first round, so third and fourth round I came 8th, last round I come third. So that's working for me. If I start winning, say, 2 or 3 races in a row, then I'll start upping it a little bit to keep the challenge. But as it is, I'm not really sort of leading the points, but you know I could still be in with a good shout. Neural steering, if you're in the dry conditions, I've played around with them. I don't think they're going to offer you anything even as a beginner. I haven't done a wet race yet, so they might help you in the wet. I did find in MotoGP 24 setting some of these to moderate did help in the wet. Joint brakes. The reason I go for joint brakes is because for a start, if you use unlinked brakes, the rear brake will either be 100% on or not on at all. Whereas with joint brakes, if you pull the front trigger, that gives you roughly about 30 to 40% rear braking, which is more like real life. And I don't know, I just find it more comfortable. I've tried doing laps without joint brakes and with them on, and the lap times are generally about the same, but I just feel more comfortable with joint brakes. And certainly when I was more of a beginner at the game, definitely joint brakes was the way to go, especially if you're going to use a manual gearbox. Otherwise, you're going to be relying 100% on that front brake while you're trying to flip and press buttons to change down gears as you come into the corners. So certainly, if you're on a manual box, I'm going to say joint brakes. Anti-lock braking, again, I'm neither faster or slower with it on or off, but I certainly crash quite a lot less in the dry, in the Moto3 class this is, with it on. So I've not noticed I've got any slower with it on, because a lot of your pro riders will say, oh, you don't want any assists on, but certainly at the level I'm at, I like it. It makes the game more enjoyable. Transmission, as I've said, semi-automatic. A lot of the time, it's hard to know exactly where to be in what gear. I mean, if you can tailor your setup and your gearbox so that you're in a certain gear at certain revs for each corner, and you're going to go to that extreme, like maybe Camille would when you look at his setups that you get on YouTube, if you're happy to do that, then manual gearbox is worth it. But generally, semi-automatic gearing, it changes down more or less when you want. If not, you can force it to downshift, you can short shift still. So overall, I find the game more enjoyable with it semi-automatic. I will say occasionally in Moto 2, I have been known to run a manual gearbox on that, but in Moto 3 and MotoGP I always use semi-automatic. Starting clutch doesn't really matter. It's literally, all it is when the lights change. If it's on manual, you just let go of your left button, I think it is. Yeah, it's not major. Electronics, in the lower classes you can turn this to assisted. In Moto 3 that will give you anti-wheelie, and I will say there's a certain bit on Jerez where, as I'm coming out of one corner and going up to another, it always lifts the flipping front wheel a little bit, and if I don't catch it in time, it'll have me off. So anti-wheelie would be handy there. Unfortunately, the assists don't work on the PC. Even though I've now had 2 lots of updates, I've tested it today, it's still wheelies. So although it will come up on your dashboard and you can turn it up to 5, it's not working, so you might as well leave it on real. In the Moto 2, that also does your traction control, which again, I've tested it again today, Friday the 9th of May, still not working, even with it on 5, so you might as well have it on real. If you are playing Moto 2, you can turn the neural throttle up to on, and as long as you can handle the computer cutting your throttle as you're going into the corner, that will stop it flipping throwing the back out if you're really struggling. Otherwise, you're going to have to be better on the throttle, short shift the gears. That's where you might be better off with a manual gearbox. Off track aid, I don't know, I never bother with it, don't even know what it does. Rewinds, yeah, obviously you want them on if you're just playing career, you want to enjoy it. Trajectory aids, if you're really not sure, I mean, you'll do the tutorial, it'll have them on it. I personally think the lines put me off more than they ever helped me, so I've never ever played any of these sort of games with them on. When I was young, you didn't get that option on games, so I learnt without that. My best advice would be, really, particularly if you're doing what I said, where you're going to be sort of fighting in the midfield, is just follow the other bikes. Generally speaking, the computer will take sort of reasonable lines unless it's doing some sort of banzai overtake or something. So just follow the other bikes and you'll pick it up from there. Especially as if you're playing online, eventually you won't get that. Proximity indicators, that will be just telling you like who's behind you at the side, whatever. I personally don't think it adds anything to the game. Some of the older games used to have it. I prefer it off. I thought, again, it puts me off. Long lap penalty, assisted all day long. Because it's so hard to flipping turn in that little narrow little path what it has for you to go through, and if you go over the lines, that's it, you have to do it again. So just make sure you enter the long lap penalty bit slow enough, and then the assisted AI will kick in and sort that out. I don't know, I'll leave that 100%. Controls calibration, I'm running an Xbox 360 control, not 360, Series X controller, just standard. I haven't touched it. I did play with it on MotoGP 24. I maybe got very minor gains, but it's generally speaking, you'll kind of adapt to how the controller is. The vibration issues people keep on about, what I had was it might vibrate round a corner or something, and then it'd carry on vibrating for a whole lap and then stop. But since the patch, the update, I haven't had that problem, so that's sorted. Right, other bits. So what you can do is when you start the game, you're going to have all this shit with your ID card that you fill in. Riding style. Now this does affect the game a little bit. If you try playing with different riders on the same bike going round a track, if you start doing hot laps or something, you'll see that one rider beats another rider on certain tracks. However, you will kind of adapt your riding and setups and things to how you have it. So with this, if you're doing your career mode, I would personally say pick whichever one best represents you. If you're a rider in real life, that's how I sort of rode more or less in real life, so that's what I have. Or just pick whatever's the coolest, like elbows to the ground, body out, whatever. So but basically when I'm doing base setups for my bikes, I'm always doing them based around having that centered configuration. So most of the time when I'm showing you a full setup, that's probably 9 times out of 10 what it's gonna be on, because that's how I've sort of set all the suspension and everything up to go with. But occasionally I might change it when I run through and test them out, and I might get on better with something else, so that'll be the one that goes on the video. But most of the time that's going to work. Braking leg out generally don't make any difference to performance from what I can see, so it's whether you like the look of it better or not. Same with the feet at start, ain't going to make no difference. The braking fingers is going to make a difference. I've tested this now quite a bit, but if you're in the MotoGP class, for example, and you have 4-finger braking, generally you're going to want a smaller brake disc, otherwise you're going to be much more prone to losing the front. I think I've found so far I've only really done one setup for the MotoGP class, and I think I used 2-finger braking, and I either used the high mass 13-inch disc or just the 13. But yeah, using 4-finger braking, definitely didn't want more than the 12-inch, even with ABS on. It didn't, you know. But for Moto 3, which if you're going to do it so that you can just gradually build up, I would say 4-finger, because you can't change the brake discs. And if you try 2-finger or 1-finger, generally all what happens is you just don't slow down as quick. You're not really that much more likely to lose the front having 4-finger braking, from my sort of testing. If we go into setups, just so I can run through a couple of bits there, if you're still here. Which help. Right, when you first sort of testing a setup out on a track, whether it be in the career mode or time trial, always start off with the softest tyres, because sometimes you won't get the other ones up to temperature. I don't know, it's just a good way of starting. If you start losing the front a lot, or it starts overheating, then obviously go up a compound. Maybe when you've got your base set up, try a harder compound then. But usually what happens, if you start going for mediums and hards, you won't get full grip until like at least the second lap. So that means every time you're trying anything, you're going to have to wait until your second lap before you get full speed. Whereas with the softs, they tend to be more or less up to speed straight away out of the gate. So it just sort of saves time when you're trying to just sort of work out what you're doing, whether it be in the career mode or time trial. And I've noticed there's one or two channels that have been showing gameplay, and they've been running like the hard tyres, and you can see they're losing temperature, and you're like, man, why have you messed around with the hard tyres in a race? It's bullshit. You can see they're hardly worn at the end of the race, and they're finished in like 10th, whereas if they'd have put the right tyres on, they'd have probably been in like 3rd. So with your traction control, generally speaking, at the beginning of a race, you want to be able to have a setup that has that traction control as low as possible, with the engine brake as high as possible, as a rule. Sometimes whatever setting you have at the beginning of the race, that'll be alright for the rest of the race, but as a rule of thumb, what's going to happen is when the rear tyre starts getting worn, when you accelerate out of corners, it's going to spin. When you go into corners, it's going to start flicking the background. So after you've done sort of a lap or two, you're going to want to start turning this engine brake down, which will stop the back kicking out as much, and you're going to want to turn the traction control up, because obviously you've got less grip, it'll stop it spinning out. Usually I'll probably, whatever setups I post online, I'll probably use that setup maybe for the first lap, maybe 2 laps depending on the track, and then I'll just crank this up to full and turn that down a fair bit, because a lot of the time I can't remember to do it. Power mapping, there's been people making a fuss saying that the fueling weren't right for Thailand and all this shit. It was fine for Thailand. The skill was that what you had to do was not have it on power map 3 for the whole race. Basically, you might have to run power map 1 quite a lot, and maybe use 2 and 3 a bit on the straights. I had no problem completing the race. As I say, I think I come 13th. And then your engineer at the end of that first race, he's going to say, like, what do you think of the bike? Do you want anything improving on it? Say to it, well, I don't know now with the new patch that's put in, but before the patch, I said to him, improve the engine. When you come to the second round, you don't know it until after the second round, but basically they've sorted the fueling out, so you could run higher power for a lot longer. I come 8th in that race, and then when you go in the paddock and see the engineer again, you can see that it's got upgraded fueling on there. So that's where this game's a lot better than 24 in terms of the career, is you actually can have development without some random shit being added at the summer break that you don't even know what it is. It's just the performance rating's gone up a bit. So that's my advice there. Obviously I haven't started the career again since the patches, but I'd probably just go with that. Do your first race, get through it, tell them you want an engine upgrade. Excuse me, just belched there. Anyway, that's power mapping. I don't think there's a lot else to say. I mean, transmission sort of speaks for itself. You want the gearing as low as possible to get max acceleration, and you want the you're going to want it as high as possible to get you to the highest top speed. That's all trial and error. Obviously there's different setups. You got my setups on YouTube, which they're based around using the automatic gearbox, or you've got Camille, who's an e-sport rider. He's shit hot BML champion. His are going to be based around a manual box and probably having the gears set dead right for certain corners. So if you're going to use his gearing, I would say that you want to study his laps and you want to do them as close to exact as he's doing, getting on the throttle and everything the same, if you're going to want to use his gearing. But it's trial and error. Ultimately, you'll find your own ways of doing it. I think that is pretty much covered all the basics to get you going. It's one of them things, really. If as your level gets up, you ain't going to need people like me to tell you how to do certain things, because you'll have sussed it out yourself. But if you're still in that sort of zone where you kind of, you know how to like get the bike round the track, but you ain't quite worked out how to get faster and enjoy getting faster, that's the main thing. You want to have fun, hence why I say about doing that thing with the difficulty level. Then I'm probably one of the better people to give you advice. If you listen to the e-sport riders, they're talking from a position where they're already super fast and dialing in all their setups and doing everything that they tell you to do. If you haven't done that bit in between being sort of a fairly newbie rider and being an e-sport rider, that ain't going to work for you. Same as in real life. If I was to jump on Marc Marquez's bike, assuming that I was a good enough rider to be a MotoGP rider, because I would not be Marc Marquez, that is not going to work for me. So that's what you got to think. Whereas I'm a much less skilled rider than somebody like Camille, but I'm good enough to know the difference between a good setup and a shit setup. So take it as you want. Hopefully you'll get something out of this. Got something out of this video. If you have any suggestions for content, let me know. If the channel starts to get bigger, because I am now picking up a decent amount of subs, I'll perhaps look at getting Forza Motorsport again, because I keep getting people asking about Forza setups. But if I do get that game, if anyone's watching, I ain't going to be doing Forza setups without people sort of voting on which setup they want, because it just takes too long to do any setups for any of these games to basically end up getting like 50 views. It just ain't worth it. At least with the MotoGP game, any setup I do is going to there or thereabouts be right for all of the bikes in that class on that track, which is why I've kind of favoured it. Plus I enjoy playing MotoGP a lot more than I did the car game. So there we go. Anyway, please like, share and subscribe if you think the content's any good. Any suggestions would be appreciated. See you on the next one. Thank you.